I think it's safe to say that I had an amazing childhood when it came to kids' TV. I mean, granted, some of the shows weren't as cool as the ones we had in the 90s and the 80s, but I know for a fact that the shows that I watched shaped who I am today. In the late 90s and early 2000s, we had some of the weirder concepts for shows aimed at children. 4 grown men singing children's songs. Librarian lions. A ballerina mouse. Like I said, weird. But today I'm here to show you my 4 favorite kids' TV shows. They are in no definitive order, and I just want you to sit back and enjoy my choices. What is there to say about Arthur? Well, some kids in elementary school thought that I looked a lot like him. Do you see it? Because I don't. Arthur is an animated show about an 8-year-old aardvark and his adventures with his friends that consist of rabbits, rats, and whatever it is Francine and Muffy are. This show dared to tackle the big issues such as stealing.
Signed, unanimous. Buster, it's anonymous, not unanimous.
Inhumane justice halls.
Free verse! Free verse!
And gender conundrums.
So, what is it?
You can't talk to Francine. She's a girl. I was here last year and it's always boys against girls.
Girls are winning. Unacceptable. This show was originally based on a series of books by author Mark Brown. Brown apparently based the characters of Arthur's family on his own. It's kind of like what Matt Groening did with The Simpsons, but more child-friendly. I mean, can you hear Arthur ever saying something like,
"Eat my shorts"?
No. But the tonal difference between The Simpsons and Arthur is a discussion to be had another day. But for now, let's raise the question, why has this show lasted so long? Arthur is now entering its 19th season, and with good reason. The show deals with issues that are relevant to kids today as well as the late 90s. It's constantly updating technology to keep up with today's society, so it can make the show feel a tad disjointed if watched in a marathon. Which I didn't do. I swear. The show features a wide array of characters aside from Arthur and his family. There's Francine, who's kind of a bitch but means well. Muffy, who's rich, but that's pretty much her whole character now. Binky, a bully who's more sensitive than he lets on. The Brain, who's super smart. And Sue Ellen, a character who's supposed to transcend the typical girly stereotypes that appear in other shows. Early in the show's history, the writers were smart enough to put any 2 characters in a situation and still make the writing sharp enough that the story was engaging. Arthur's sister DW has quite some one-liners.
Hey, watch where you're going!
Okay, that last one didn't happen, but you can see why some people find DW as the most standout character of the show.
Is there a mathematician in the house? You, sir. You look very mathy.
She's hilarious, well-written, and doesn't take shit from anyone. Now that's a character I can get behind. Like most shows nowadays, Arthur made the inevitable switch in style. I'm not saying that the whole show got an upgrade. More like a downgrade. Starting with season 16, Arthur was rendered in flash animation instead of traditional digital ink and paint. It looks stilted and awkward compared to the quick style of the hand-drawn animation. However, this isn't the only show in this retrospective that had an animation style change halfway through its run. Okay, this show was the fucking bomb. At least in its first 6 years. Thomas and Friends, originally titled Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, began airing in the UK in 1984 and was shopped overseas to the United States in the late 1980s in a show called Shining Time Station. Go where the rail may run. That show, while featuring Thomas, was annoying, awkward, repetitive, and had a significant lack of tension. The actual segments with Thomas aired independently from Shining Time Station in the UK, however, and showed us that shows with a production budget of a shoestring could actually be some of the most entertaining children's programming ever. But it's not the story that keeps people coming back, it's the characters. And oh, what a lineup we have. There's Thomas, he's the cheeky one. James is vain, but lots of fun. Okay, I'm gonna stop with that engine roll call bullshit. But seriously, the main characters of this show are Thomas, Edward, Henry, Gordon, James, Percy, and Toby. At least that was the main lineup when I was a kid. Now we have characters like Emily to round out the female gender gap that was apparently missing throughout the first couple years of the show. Who knew that railways could be such a sausage fest? There are supporting characters too, some of them much more interesting than our mains. They consisted of Donald, Douglas, Duck, Oliver, Toad, Stepney, as well as the narrow gauge engines. This could all be thought of as the B Squad. This meaning that they all had at least one solo episode to their name, and some of them were actually quite terrifying. In the canon of the TV series, steam engines are apparently really hard to come by, as stated in this line from Escape.
I'm afraid that unless one is saved from scrap, there's little hope.
But that's total BS, because Sir Topham Hatt gets a new steam engine like every season. Fat fuck. But there are 4 characters whose plights are very significant in terms of their future on the show, and they were Stephanie, Trevor, and Oliver and Toad. All 4 of these characters were saved from the scrapyard by another character on the show and integrated into the railway to be useful in some manner. Why is this terrifying? Because a scrapyard in a railway is basically like a nursing home in real life. You're nearing the end of your usefulness. Granted, humans can't exactly get a facelift when they're 100 years old, but the fact still stands. Like Arthur before it, Thomas and Friends also went through a change in animation style. We went from impressive-looking models and sets to models with CGI faces to complete CGI. We also went from having one person voicing every character to everyone having a different voice actor. This, to me, is a welcomed addition because it makes stories easier to follow.
Spencer?
Thomas! Am I glad to see you?
Well, I'm glad to see you too, Henry.
I wasn't initially for the animation change in this show, but after watching a few of the more recent episodes, it's clear that CGI was the best direction this series could take. It can do much more than models can. That and the writing is better.
Maybe the abominable snowman has taken him.
The abominable snowman!
Abominable snowman! Utter tis-tosh!
This one is from way back and is covered in more felt than I'd care to admit. After the success of Sesame Street, Jim Henson was looking to expand the familiarity of his Muppet brand and maybe even produce a variety show for primetime television. Enter The Muppet Show. Originally produced in England and later syndicated in the US, The Muppet Show followed the antics of Kermit, Miss Piggy, Fozzie, Gonzo, and several others as they attempted to put on a weekly variety show. Every week there would be a new guest star who would sing, act, and interact with the misgivings backstage. It sounds a lot like SNL, but the pilots of The Muppet Show, namely The End of Sex and Violence and The Muppets Valentine Special, predate SNL. Muppets for the win!
Smoke weed every day.
Now, you might be wondering, Dustin, how could you have watched this show when it was aired in the 70s and you just weren't there? Well, I watched the episodes when they aired on Hallmark with my grandparents, and then I also watched them when they aired on Disney Channel in the early 2000s. I bought the first 3 seasons, and the only available ones, on DVD when they came out, and many an hour was spent in front of a screen soaking up the comic brilliance that was The Muppet Show. The recurring sketches involved At the Dance, in which pairs would be dancing while telling jokes that usually revolved around a common theme.
Do you prefer Shakespeare to bacon?
I prefer anything to bacon.
Veterinarian's Hospital, in which Ralph, Janice, and Miss Piggy would help patients while telling awful jokes.
Oh, wow, this is happening a lot lately.
What is?
Dr. Bob is losing his patients.
Pigs in Space, in which Miss Piggy, Captain Link Hogthrob, and Julius Strangepork traveled space representing all of pork kind.
Link, I think we found the answer.
Oh. It's a coincidence, Strangepork.
My personal favorite is Veterinarian's Hospital. The bad jokes are just way too funny not to use in real life. And now, presenting my top 5 favorite Veterinarian's Hospital sketches. Number 5, from the Bernadette Peters episode. Who knew that a shoe could be so funny?
Sure, just look at this old lace.
Arsenic and old lace? Dr. Bob, that's an old show.
Well, that's an old shoe.
Well, that's an old joke.
Number 4, from the Lou Rawls episode. The sketch is done once, but then is repeated with slightly different jokes.
Untrue, I never lose my patience.
What about the one you fed nitroglycerin to?
Him I lost, but I found him again.
Where?
In Maryland, Virginia, North and South Carolina. That's him all over.
Number 3, from the Ben Vereen episode. Fred is a terrible name for a hospital.
Dr. Bob, you've given this hospital a bad name.
You're right. Fred is a terrible name for a hospital. I'll have to give it a better name. How about Eunice?
Number 4, from the Elton John episode. Do we really know what kind of a dog Baskerville is?
He could be a guard dog. You know, I know a woman who was once attacked by her own guard dog.
Doberman Pinscher?
No, Doberman Bitter.
No.
And number 1, from the Don Knotts episode, the screaming thing from the opening number has 3 left feet.
3 feet, Dr. Bob. What do you make of that?
Oh, about a yard.
The show didn't steer away from its more dramatic, poignant moments just because it was a comedy. There were at least 2 musical numbers that I would watch over and over because they were just so beautiful. Inchworm in the Charles Aznavour episode.
Inchworm, measuring the marigold.
And Sad Song from the Paul Williams episode.
From those good old days, those tears and sweet memories draw.
The Muppet Show is must-watch TV. Now, this last one is very special to me because some of my earliest memories involve watching this show. Animaniacs originally ran from 1993 to 1998 and featured many recurring sketches and characters. My personal favorites were Slappy Squirrel and Chicken Boo, but more on those later. The show, for the most part, focuses on the antics of the Warner Brothers and Warner's sister, Yakko, Wacko, and Dot, as they run around the Warner movie lot. See what I did there? The show's format was unique because it didn't really feature a full 22-minute story like The Simpsons, and didn't have 2 11-minute segments like its sister show, Tiny Toon Adventures. The length of the shorts varied greatly as well. I mean, sometimes there'd be 2 sketches per show, sometimes there'd be 3 sketches per show, and sometimes, this happened very rarely, one sketch would spend the entire running time getting played out. But on another note, I think the show was strongest when it was critiquing pop culture at the time. There's a great bit in Hooray for North Hollywood Part 2 where Dot is talking to a parody of Joel Schumacher. They're just making small talk and then Dot suddenly says,
I've seen all of your films.
Really? What do you think of them?
I think you should keep making them.
Thanks.
Eventually one of them is bound to turn out watchable.
My jaw dropped. As a kid, I never caught this joke, but as a teenager who's seen some of Mr. Schumacher's films, I can safely agree with her. A brief rundown will now commence. Slappy and Skippy Squirrel. Slappy, a Golden Arrow cartoon veteran, and her nephew Skippy get into various situations. My favorite sketch involves them going to Woodstock and playing homage to Who's on First.
On stage, Skippy. Look, see the band?
No, I don't.
Get rid of those John Lennon glasses and look. There's the band.
No, that's not the band. The band is performing later on. Who's on stage?
You tell me.
Who?
Chicken Boo. A rather large chicken slips into casual situations and no one seems to notice. Pinky and the Brain. One of them's a genius, the other's insane. Who's to say who's who? The Goodfeathers. In a parody of Goodfellas, 3 pigeons with heavy accents shout verbal abuse at each other and get into other situations. There were a few others as well, but that was your basic lineup. And the writing, the smooth animation, and the quick wit make Animaniacs a staple of 1990s animation. So there you go. I think in terms of children's animation, I grew up in the right era, and I began to outgrow shows like Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon, save for a few. Total Drama Island, hello. Things kind of started to go to crap afterwards. And there are plenty of videos people have complained about that, so you can go ahead and Google them. I'm not going to give you any examples. This is Dustin signing off, but only for now.
Have you ever realized how frighteningly easy it is to manipulate someone into doing whatever you want?
Brain, you're acting kind of weird today.
Am I?